Hey everyone, it's Luke Cook here, and I'm on an absolute mission to find incredible individuals who are turning their moments into positive movements of social change. In this series that you're about to watch, called Moments to Movements, we catch up with 4 incredible Aussies who are doing just that. So sit back, relax, and learn about their stories. So Yas, ex-champion athlete, police officer.
Yep.
You head up an incredible organisation here in Australia. It's a global organisation, but from the Australian Army in Qoria.
Yeah, Qoria is a really interesting organisation. We're a global technology company essentially, and we're on a mission to make sure that every child thrives in their digital life. And we do that in 3 different ways. We have technology for good, technology that's going to make sure that they stay safe, and that's everything from parental control tools to filters used in schools. We have some monitoring technology that really does intervene in those important moments. So a quick example for you, we have a school in the United States that we look after that not so long ago intervened because it picked up a child searching for ammunition on their learning device. And it flagged, triaged, and the police ended up going around to that child's house and found him packing his guns into his bag on his way to school. So really powerful technology. And we also create, thought leadership pieces, global insights reports for parents, for schools, and of course work in advocacy. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment around age verification, social media bans, as I'm sure that you probably heard of over the last couple of months, and really trying to help parents understand what that means and try and give them the tools and the education to make good informed choices so they have agency when it comes to their kids.
All right, let's get to the core of today's discussion.
Yeah.
And I suppose I want to get to know you a little bit more, Yas. I know we've had a lot of surface level conversations over our time.
Yeah.
Not surface, we go deep. But,
we go deep.
But I want to chat more about you. So, champion athlete, police officer, and now you head up this incredible organisation here in Australia. What pivotal moments have happened in your life to get you to this point today?
Well, if I go back to, my early days as a swimmer, so I swam for Australia, I swam at the World Championships, I've won gold, silver and bronze medals as an athlete there. It really set the foundation, for my life. It taught me all of the great skills, resilience, grit, determination, discipline, and saying yes and turning up for yourself, If I think back to, that skill of self-reliance that swimming really taught me. I'm reminded of a story. One of my first national teams that I made, I was on a team with Thorpe. And in one of the expectations was that every athlete, got themselves up, was responsible for, their performance, was responsible for how they held themselves throughout the meet. And one of the things that they were pretty strict on was making sure that we turned up everywhere on time. So going down to the bus before we went off to the pool in the morning, you were expected to be there. And I remember learning about this because this one particular morning, Thorpe slept in. And I'm sure that he was always, very on time outside of this. But the head coaches on this trip decided, because we were going out for the final day of competition, this is where he was going to win all the medals, that if he wasn't there and he couldn't get himself up on time, that we were going to leave him. And they got in the bus and we left without Ian Thorpe, our star performer. And, those moments as a, 13, 14-year-old really taught me that no one else is going to come and save me, that you're responsible for your own success. And I think that's always stuck with me no matter what I've done. Yeah.
And then what about the force? Because working in the police force is a different, obviously the discipline and all that type of stuff will be there, but what were the moments that made you think, well, okay, supporting kids in particular is something that you want to be
involved in?
Yeah.
Look, the police is a really different kind of organisation as a woman, as someone who's part of the LGBTIQ+ community. And obviously the things that you see and experience are really different. It's really incomparable to many other careers. But when it comes to young people, I worked as a youth liaison officer for about 8 of my 13 years of service. So I worked with young people day in, day out. And I worked in the eastern suburbs at a command called Rose Bay. And I remember going to Rose Bay. I grew up in the area, but there was this sort of thought that Rose Bay was a really, it's obviously an affluent area, but an easy area to police, basically because rich people didn't really have problems. And what I found when I worked at Rose Bay was the complete opposite, especially when it came to a lot of the young people that we dealt with. Now, I found myself pretty much, sometimes every shift, sometimes a couple of times a shift, sometimes a few times a week up at the Gap. Now, if you don't know too much about the Gap, it's a 96-metre high cliff top, which is very famous, unfortunately, for people who are suffering suicidal ideation and want to harm themselves. And so as an officer, you know, I was getting used to going up and doing these negotiations pretty regularly. But in 2012, I was up there and was confronted with a 14-year-old girl over the incorrect side of the fence. And when I started to speak to her about why she was there, she explained to me that someone in her class at school had taken a picture of her without her knowing and posted it to Instagram, where people who she thought were her friends had berated her looks and told her that she was a loser. And someone at the end of that message thread said, "Why don't you go and drink bleach and kill yourself?" Now, at that point in time, as I mentioned, I'd spoken to lots of adults, but this was my first interaction with a young person. And it was the penny drop moment for me where I just went, this is a real world consequence of what happens online. And it really sort of started me on my journey, I guess, into the online world and what I could do to educate but advocate for kids as well. You know, as a youth liaison officer, I had to teach about cyber safety, but the police had sent me into a school with a PowerPoint with the Telecommunications Criminal Code Act on it and, you know, expect that to land for them. And, you know, for me, I really wanted to find ways to build connection, to meet them where they're at, to help them understand that there are things that they can do to protect themselves and each other. And of course, you know, their parents and communities, what do we need to do to make sure that we build their resilience but keep them safe at the same time? Yeah.
So as you started that journey and you started to uncover more and more around the digital onslaught that is appearing and that we're experiencing, how has your narrative either strengthened around that component?
It's really easy to fall into a fear-based mindset with this. You know, I tell this story about the Gap, and I tell that, you know, to try and help illustrate why I'm passionate about this. But I know that even sharing this with parents and with grandparents, it's a really confronting story to hear. That is the extreme end. And as parents, I guess, and I guess for myself, I put myself in that same category. There are things that we can do. There's skills that we can learn. Parenting is a skill set. You know, and the online world is no different. So I have hope. I want to play a role in making sure that people feel empowered rather than scared. And I'm doing a lot of, I guess, advocacy work around that too, so that people are informed. We spoke earlier about the media and the influence that has on people's perceptions, and it's not always accurate. You know, we talk about things like misinformation. That is the single biggest threat to humanity over the next 2 years, according to the World Economic Forum. So it's about knowing what's true, what's not, and trying to have a balanced approach, I guess, to online safety for kids.
When you're going into the schools with what you do, or as part of that organisation, how do you see our kids of today?
It's really hard. There's some of them that are really resentful that social media exists if you get down and have a really good conversation with them. A lot of them would say, you know, if you had the choice that it didn't exist, would you choose that? And a lot of them would say yes. Others think that it's an amazing tool. They are entertained, they learn from, you know, as much as it sounds terrible, your TikToks of the world and your Instagrams of the world. You know, that's where they're going to get their information. And at the moment, it's not curated in a way that is safe enough for them to rely on. But I think the reality is that we're going into a digital first world, and like it or not, the opportunity to tap out isn't there anymore. And so we've got to really teach them the skills that they need and the knowledge that they need to be resilient, to overcome the challenges that they will face in that world. And they're in for that. You know, they know that this is the way that it's going. They want people, though, to meet them where they're at. They don't want people coming in with that Telecommunications Criminal Code Act slide and pretending like they're going to get arrested if they do the wrong thing online. So I think if you're a person that approaches it with a curious mindset, that understands the reasons that they love these spaces, that understands the benefits and is able to balance that with the risks when you actually have the conversations that matter with them, then they're a lot more open to what you've got to say.
From a worldview of what we can experience, or what probably keeps you up a little bit at night as well, what are some of the biggest trends that you're seeing from a general digital impact?
There's a lot. I mean, pornography, the manosphere, the toxic misogyny, cultures that are starting to perpetuate in online environments for our boys is something that scares me, because it impacts everyone. It impacts them and their own well-being. It disproportionately impacts women and girls. Coupled with the rise of things like AI, there's a real risk of harm for our women and for our girls growing up. When it comes to deep fake technology, for example, 96% of deep fakes online are pornographic in nature, and 99% of them depict women without their consent. There's a lot of issues around that. At the moment, I've just come off writing a white paper around how AI is impacting child sexual abuse material, which is a frightening space to be in. 2023 went down as the biggest year on record for the sharing of CSAM. And, AI is not going to help that as we go along. Predators are using it in ways that you couldn't even imagine to fine-tune their approaches to young people, to share what they know with other predators on the dark web, using things like voice cloning tools, using deepfake technology to create fictitious avatars and approach kids, role-playing with tools like ChatGPT to learn what are the right words to say, what are the levers to pull if I'm talking to a 10-year-old girl on Roblox, for example. So AI is a really big issue, and we need to find a way to harness it and to have a safety-first mindset to make sure that it doesn't get too out of control.
Beyond the education piece, which is primarily what each one of us can do, is just formally educate ourselves, educate our kids, etc. What role and responsibility do the actual tech platforms have in making sure that this stuff doesn't happen?
They have a huge role, and we certainly should not release the responsibility from them in terms of what they need to do to safeguard their platforms. But, I work on the Online Safety Advisory Committee for Meta and for TikTok, and so I'm in these trust and safety conversations with a lot of them at the moment. And there is a lot of work being done behind the scenes, despite what you may see or hear when it comes to the media. TikTok, for example, has 40,000 people in their trust and safety team globally. 40,000 people. Now, some of those people might be offshore. They're not all, obviously working in capital cities, but that's a really huge investment. And I think it's important to pay credit where credit is due. The bigger question, though, when it comes to platforms and their responsibility is the three names that aren't really in the media at the moment, and that is Google, Apple, and Microsoft.
Why them?
They control the devices that we use. And so when we're having these conversations about our kids creating situations where they're accessing things that they shouldn't on something like Meta or TikTok, there are solutions that are not being offered to parents by these big tech gateways that can prevent 100% a child accessing TikTok if they're not allowed to. It's called enterprise on-device safety technology, and I know that sounds like a really convoluted word. Basically what it means is businesses, so any business that wants to safeguard their staff and their equipment, have this really robust technology offered to them through these big tech gateways. And they won't offer it to parents because it's not commercially viable. Now, when we think about social media platforms, I just want to, frame this conversation a different way. They have a lot of work to do, but believe it or not, they are some of the safest platforms out there. They have trust and safety teams, they have money to invest, they have billions of dollars that they're pouring into their platforms.
And people are watching them as well.
People are watching them, and they're an easy target. I'm not saying that they're great, don't get me wrong, but they're an easy target for the media. What we know will happen and what we've seen overseas is if we gate those sorts of platforms or we try to block kids completely from accessing them, what they will do is go to much darker and more dangerous places in the internet. The ones that don't have the money, don't have the budget or the willingness to put age verification gates in place, for example. And kids can get around what's in place at the moment now as well. So the devices, on-device technology is the way forward in terms of how we prevent our kids from accessing inappropriate content, but we need those big tech platforms to decide to hand the license over to parents so that they're able to have those same capabilities as businesses have all around the world.
How do parents start to inform themselves better around what they can be doing to protect their children?
We've got to lean in to the conversations, and I think, the fact that you've come today to learn, you're head and shoulders above so many other parents that just don't see the risks and the issues. It's about making the time to understand what's going on. And so to really simplify it, being a parent myself, I know it's a lot of information to try and take in around the online world. So what I say is focus on the ABCs: controlling your child's access, setting boundaries, and communicating with them as often and early as you can. So when it comes to access, it's about making sure that if you're going to allow them a social media platform, that you understand that there are privacy controls within the platform and that there are parental control tools, for example, while we'd like them to be more effective, do work for younger kids and certainly, to the age of sort of 13, maybe 14 if you're lucky. So controlling their access, having visibility over what they're doing. When it comes to boundaries, like anything, you wouldn't let your child leave the house at midnight and wander around chatting to people on the street. We've got to treat the online world in the same way. These are places that kids go to these days, not just platforms. And so they're going to meet people, they're going to have experiences that may or may not be age appropriate. So what are the rules around the online world? What do I expect you to do if you come across someone who is maybe not who they said they were, or gives you a bit of a no feeling in your tummy, making sure that we're talking the right language, I guess, for our kids. And when it comes to communication, the most important thing of all is your children knowing that if something goes wrong, even if they feel that they're at fault, that they can come to you and you'll be able to help them and you won't make the situation worse in their eyes, okay? And I think what I mean by that is kids have their own, I guess, version of success. If there's an incident, if there's something that goes wrong, a lot of the time parents will, call up the other mother of the child that, got in trouble, or call up the school. And for a young person, that's not what they want. They might have just wanted to have a conversation. They might have just wanted to know how to report something or someone. They might have just wanted to role play a conversation with you because they know that the person that they're having conflict with online, they're going to see at school the next day and they don't know how to handle that conversation. So it's not always about that fix-it reflex that we have as parents. It's about listening to our kids and asking, what does a good solution look like for you here and how can I help you achieve that?
It's such an important conversation. And you said it before around, people like Andrew Tate and what they're leading for this, what they're saying to the world and the impact that that's having on young men.
Yeah.
And it's going to be an ongoing effect if we don't tackle that. Before we ask for any questions, like if people were going to walk away from today to do one action, what would it be?
Open up that conversation with your children about the online world. Make sure that they know that no matter what, if anything happens, that they can come to you, that you're not necessarily going to blame them, you're not going to take their phone away or cut them off social media, that you'll have those conversations with them about the understanding that it's going to play a role in their life. You're not going to give them unfettered access, but you'll stand beside them and understand the importance of them being part of that world.
And I think everything that we've spoken about is how do we create enough noise that things actually do start to take place. So we can't be sitting there in silence for this not to change, for the big platforms like Apple and Microsoft to then start putting these options in there so it's not just relying on the Metas and the TikToks and all that of the world, where politics starts to drive change, where corporates lead it with their own employees for the voice, where schools are doing the best they can. It is a collective effort for all these things to turn moments into movements. So Yas, can everyone give a big round of applause to Yas today?